We are in the final hours of 2018, a very significant and consequential year, whether it be the multiple government shutdowns that we had, the historic US North Korea summit, the US pulling out of the INF treaty after being in it for 30 years. Many eventful things happened this year, such as those and among others. But one of the things of consequence that you really can see that has been reflected by this year in particular is an almost obsession with elections, um, to such an extent that the politics of the people involved were thrown out the window or the wazoo. And what I mean by that, well, you go on places like Twitter and you see "Vote Blue to Save America," and this is in reference to the midterms that happened. And then right before the year is getting ready to close, we get an announcement from Warren that she's running for, or rather forming an exploratory committee for a presidential election that still isn't for almost another 2 years. So you also had the Mueller investigation, or Mueller rather, which looked into Russian interference in the 2016 election. So that's 3 elections that all throughout this year found themselves wedged together. What I find all the more disturbing, but I kind of am somewhat not optimistic for, is this idea that we become so vested in the almost playfulness of politics that we abandon the whole purpose of them, which is to rein in certain positions and ideas based off of who is in a position of power to implement them. When I spoke yesterday about the over 1,000 individuals that have been killed by the U.S. government inadvertently in its strikes against ISIS, I had mentioned that it had started in August of 2014. It lasted until last month, and this was something that had been going on between Democrat and Republican. I believe we're going to get a retread of the same lack of outrage, or rather one-sided anger, that we've seen with positions and issues continued such as that, because people now are going to be in full campaign swing mode even after just getting off the hills of midterm, and decide to weigh on whether or not they believe someone is worth checking out. But unfortunately, when you look at a lot of the talk about these election cycles where they mention, oh, this person is they can pick up the Rust Belt, and oh, they're going to stand up to Trump, and all of this other stuff that should not really matter in the grand scheme of, can this individual effectively govern and what are their positions on issues, that has caused me to become so despondent in terms of looking forward to this election cycle. Like I said, we have plenty of actual topics that are worth discussing, that are continuously changing and being updated, and people just won't sit back and have the same level of interest that they will in a presidential election. And when they have interest in those elections, it doesn't seem as if they're voting based off of policy substance in many cases. So you get caught up in the thing of Trump nicknaming people, and then the person afterwards saying that he has a lack of manhood, and some other personal attack that's not related to the whole point of any of this stuff. It seems as if when you go and you tell people that it's time to be aggressive with what the problems are of the U.S. and kind of just around the world, they don't really put it into play unless it's coming out the mouth of someone much more famous. And I guess that's kind of why we are where we are. So I actually made this comment on Twitter earlier with a person who was talking about how they had never heard of Warren up until she announced for president. And I had said, this is why, we have Trump. We have this person who was famous for decades, kind of like Hillary. And notably, both of them became the respective nominees for that last election cycle. And this kind of failed attention to people that are pushing for certain positions, whether you like them or not, is what has caused us to deteriorate in the manner by which we have. They There was some poll they did that showed most people couldn't even name uh, a Supreme Court justice, or a good chunk of them couldn't. It was like 30%, 40. And this is around the time that Kavanaugh was confirmed. That's another major event. But what is it going to take for people to really become interested? And that's sort of what's been one of the good things about having Trump over Hillary, where people would be tricked by the media into thinking it was just business as usual. And a lot of individuals are more eccentric about this stuff. But again, the derangement syndrome, we have people who've spent all year getting pissed at him over pretty much everything and talking about, oh, you love dictators like Kim Jong Un, that's why you met with him, and basically finding any way to get upset by whatever he does. And I don't want to be on that team. I don't want to be on the side that is so consumed with hatred for this particular politician that they can't see the forest for the trees. Um, I often pose the question when people talk about impeaching him and getting rid of him, and that's something that's going to be another major topic of next year if he actually can get impeached, which I'm still leaning toward no, because Republicans control the Senate still, so that would fall through in there. But they'll go and they'll say, I would say to them, if he is so bad, what do you think is going to happen with Pence? It's kind of like how there's been this push to get Tucker Carlson off of TV by going after his advertisers. Um, and he, let's say they're successful, they get him booted off of there. What happens then? Do they believe that they're going to put some progressive commentator on there? Some, is Abby Martin going to move to Fox News all of a sudden? It's all based around these emotions that are still in play from that election cycle 2 years ago that have really failed to sustain people in logical reasoning and thinking. The election cycle happened. Trump is in office. And whether you think he should be impeached or not, he's still in a position of power. The positions that he likes, whether you like them or not, will be continued by people after he leaves. So instead of getting obsessed with this man for a 4 to 8 year period, it'd be better off if you actually went out of your way to make sure people who have his positions, regardless of what party they're from, will get thrown out. Just like when Manchin voted for Kavanaugh, I saw a slight itty bitty teeny tiny amount of what I want from people, which is, if the politicians are going to vote the same way, let's treat them the same way, which is with disdain. If they vote in a the same way, in a way that we don't like. And I'd actually had a person earlier in the year, when the Kavanaugh stuff was kind of starting to go into full kick, when the allegations came out, who said, how could you think the Democrats would be responsible for him getting on the court? Completely abandoning the logic of most of these Supreme Court nominees that get confirmed now draw bipartisan support. This was the case for Gorsuch, who I believe had 3 Democrats vote for him last year. So it didn't surprise me when at least one of them voted against Kavanaugh. But again, that's the emotional attitude that I could really not care less. I couldn't care less to see it ever again, because it's not rooted in what is problematic here. When Trump does his State of the Union, presumably if we're going to have one from all the unorthodox things that have happened in the last 2 years, I'm going to do my own State of the Union. I'm going to bring up statistics and facts and multiple issues across the U.S., how I think they can be solved, and really kind of try to paint the picture of, this isn't just the resist Trump channel. This is the, I am a progressive. I don't care what party you say you're from. I don't care to endorse either party. I care to endorse the ideas that I like, and I don't care who does them. That's why, as I said before, when Trump pulled out of Syria and when he met with Kim Jong Un, I gave him credit. I said, this is a good thing. I hope he does more of that. Now, obviously, I mentioned before, his Treasury Department earlier this month put new sanctions on North Korea's top officials, and he keeps getting called the Putin puppet. And then Russia tests some missile earlier this month where they said it can supposedly pierce through U.S. defenses. So there's a lot of stuff that is not right with the world's relations. You get a little bit of good and then some bad, and then you kind of are left in this part where you're watching it develop. And a lot of people that are on the left, went after him for getting out of Syria because they don't stand for anything. And a lot of Republicans that, I beforehand had clashed with over him bombing 7 countries like Obama, uh, were crediting him for getting out now after, pretending to be hawks. So all of these people have no ideology, and they really are one of the more cancerous parts of election cycles and just politics in general, because you should never get so caught up in the fanfare of, "Ooh, who's going to run for president? Who's going to run for president?" that you abandon their ideas. That's why with this Never Bernie crowd that we've seen, that's going to, probably try to annoy him during, this upcoming year. They will, be the first ones to bootlick for people like Kamala Harris or Cory Booker or, Julian Castro, who have embraced Medicare for all or single payer, which is an idea that Bernie spearheaded, that they up until last year had probably heard nothing about or didn't care to speak anything about. So there's a lot of empty suits in play. There's a lot of people who want you to believe they're one way when they're really another. And it's going to pour over into next year, unfortunately. There probably will be another attempt to impeach Trump. I think it'll be successful. And we're going to get caught up in the hysteria of a presidential campaign to where we might actually, again, ignore major issues. I to this day, still post on Twitter daily about the $717 billion military budget, along with this recently, this 100,000 troops, that 100,000 civilians that were inadvertently killed by the U.S. government while it was going after ISIS, because these are important stories that it doesn't matter if it's this year, next year, the year before that, are too significant to leave to one article to hear one time and then, do nothing about. That's why, in being aware of the crappy form of media that we have on television, courtesy of the Telecommunications Act of 1996, I feel the desire and the drive to go out and keep talking about this stuff. It's too important to not bring up over and over again. And I would appreciate it if my subscribers share that particular content. I don't think they will. I think it's going to be me, posting it online again. But if they do, I would be thankful. And I'm not doing it for me. I'm doing it for these topics because they're just that significant. And that's really what all that should be said about this past year. We had a lot of important things happen that were, with the exception of maybe the Kavanaugh hearing, pushed to the side burner, so we could sit here and get all excited about an election that isn't even happening with any level of recentism. And it is just going to be all the more worse next year. But if it can become a discussion of ideas, that can turn into something that's better. I just hope that in the midst of that discussion, we don't lose sight of the fact that Trump is still in the White House, occasionally doing something that is either good or, heinous and evil. And, you can't let all these different people that want to be where he is distract you from what he's still doing. But again, they have to let that be the driving force of the topic. So thank you.